You guys are so lucky you have small chairs because I want to crawl underneath them right now. You guys. Yeah, it's so fitting what we're talking about today too. But I thought I had the upper hand this morning because last night with Dave preaching at one church and I'm preaching here, I called Dave's brother, who's a friend of mine, and got some embarrassing pictures of Dave to put up on the screen, and yet he outdid me again. But I feel like, Dave, if you watch this later, here's where I win. I found out your wife skipped going to one church and stayed to listen to me preach instead. So, yeah. Take that, Dave Shepard. I win. No, seriously, my name is John Engler, the pastor at One Church. If you don't know, you guys were instrumental in helping us plant a little over a year ago. We've been about a year and a half old, so we're coming up on our 2 year, where you guys are coming up on 10 years. And Dave and I were kind of talking back a few months ago, and I said, I'd love to do a sermon series with you guys. This will be so cool to kind of combine this and work together, and we were going back and forth, and he said, well, what are you thinking? And I went, I feel like as a pastor, we get all these people that come and talk to us, and they're like, I got a question for you, but it's not me. I'm not doubting my faith. It's a friend of mine, right? They throw somebody else under the bus rather than themselves, or, I know what this means, but they don't know and it's you get all these questions. So I said, why don't we do an entire thing asking for a friend? It gives us a chance. So you guys have put out a way to have people ask questions. One Church, we've done that. And so Dave and I went through all of the countless questions that you guys asked. I had to take a good majority of the ones hey, is Dave really that cool? Or is Matt's jeans really that tight? And we had to skip those, and we just don't have enough time on a Sunday to answer the deeper questions like that. But no, we went through these, and we kind of landed on a couple different themes. And the hope of these 4 weeks is that you will continue to ask questions, that those things that we doubt. I'm telling you as a pastor, I went to Bible college, and Dave would say the same thing. We still have doubts. We still have questions. We still have things we don't understand. And that's part of just being a Christian. So that part aside, but this is a way for us to dive in and ask and learn from each other. So of all the different questions that came up, and this week, Dave's preaching at One Church. He should be finishing up. Well, he should have already been done by now. If he's not, they're going to boo him off. But we went through all this different stuff, and we're both talking about, the question came up a lot, why do we do church differently? And that question, Dave and I both immediately laughed at, right? Yes, we do things very, very differently. At One Church, the saying kind of goes, and what's John's dumb idea? And John has a stupid idea or a dumb idea, and we go with it, and it's kind of fun, and we just play it up. What next? If I get up there for announcement time, they know some stupid thing is coming up, hey, we want to go and do this, and it seems so outrageous, and then it happens. We as a church, we were given some land. I said, why don't we build a house on it for a flood family? How are we going to do that? I don't know. I'm just telling you, our dumb ideas. Let's build a house. Let's do it. Right? We just go forward. So we have these dumb ideas, and it kind of cracked me up because a couple weeks ago, somebody came up to my wife and I, and they're like, I really don't like that we call our pastor dumb. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm leaning hard into the fact that I come up with dumb ideas, and Jamie's like, try being married to him. We get those all the time. And I can't deny it, right? But there's so much in that, and part of that is the culture. So when we went to plant, I'd known Matt for years, back in even his high school days, working with his dad, but also we did camps and did different things together. Right? So I known Matt for years, and when we went to plant, I reached out to Matt and also Dave, because I'm friends with Dave's brother, and I said, hey, can I meet with you guys? So we got together, and we kind of went back and forth, and I can still, it's been almost 2 years, and I can still see Dave sitting across from me, eating tons of chips and salsa and going, okay, what are you hoping to get out of this meeting? And I said, I just want to steal some of your guys' culture. I want to steal some of your DNA. I watched this church plant 10 years ago. I knew Jason, and I watched what you guys did, and I love so many things about it. And I've seen so much other hurt and so many churches not doing things that I can get on board with, so I want to steal as much of that as possible. And it was just this beautiful moment, to sit there, and it's yeah, let's be part of this. Let's be part of what you guys are doing. You be part of us. in that culture, in that understanding, the church has a culture. You guys as Thrive Church have a culture. You have a DNA that you guys have built. And it was started by Jason when he planted this and that team that planted that. And you guys leaned hard into that. One church, we did the same thing. We had that culture, and culture is so important. That's the things like that. You have culture as a church. You have culture as a family, right? Like, I don't know about you, but growing up as a family, there was a certain things. My last name, Engler, was often used as a verb, if that makes sense. Like teachers, different people would be like, oh, that's a very Engler thing to do. And I was like, oh, is that good or bad? I don't really know, right? Like, so I have a picture of like my entire family as, and this was the culture. Like, I went through a bunch of pictures. We've lost my dad about a year and a half ago now. But this was like the culture of every childhood memory summed up into this picture. The paper plate in the back is my oldest brother. He was the one that was always like, I'm too good to be part of this family. So like, it was fitting, right? He's covering himself up. My other brother on the far side is just mimicking my dad. My dad was a goofball. My dad, just everything about him, like it was serious when it came time to be serious, but 99% of the time, it was just a goofball. And my mom's just sitting there smiling going, why did I marry this? Right? Like, and then you have like my one sister who just always, even to this, to my dad's final day, like would just like idolize my dad and everything about my dad and want to mimic and be like my dad. And my other sister who was just kind of in that world of like, what are we doing? This is stupid. And then you have the cute one in the middle that just lived. Right? Like that was me, like floating through the youngest of five. I just sat there in the middle watching this hot, chaotic mess around me of my siblings. And I love my siblings. I love them all for very, very different reasons. I love my parents for very, very different reasons. Like the culture of my family growing up was unique, was something that I took. And then when Jamie and I got married, it was hard because it was like, wait, you have your culture, I have my culture. How do we marriage these two cultures? Like things that we have to understand. And to understand that those cultures are very, very different. My family, we didn't do a lot at Christmas. We didn't get a lot of gifts. We didn't do that world where my wife, like I married my wife or I started dating her and I showed up and like her dad had like all of these holidays and all of these special things that happened. And it was really weird. Like, how do we marriage these two cultures? And to understand that that's the same thing that we do as a church is we come together, we have expectations. We have things that we've grown up with. I grew up in a United Methodist church. I grew up sitting in the back, and they had the little area, and you could do different stuff. So then when I talked to somebody else that grew up in the United Methodist Church, they had a very different stance than I did, and they had a different belief. They had a different whatever. And it's like, but those cultures, we marry them together. So this entire part, I thought it was perfect that we dive right in to Acts 15, because this is the early church. In Acts 15, it's titled like the Council in Jerusalem, right? So Paul and Barnabas are kind of going around and they're telling people, and this is the early part where people are telling people about Jesus. If you missed the Easter message, I'm pretty sure I can tell you what it was a little bit about, and I wasn't here. It was probably about Jesus dying on the cross and coming back. Did I get it right? Right? Okay, that's usually the safe one, right? But the entire part of Jesus dying on the cross, the entire Easter message that we talk about is that Jesus came for everyone. We have the Jews and the Gentiles. We have the Jews, which most of everybody was in the Bible times in that world, like they believed in God. And then you had everybody else that was the Gentiles that were kind of new to this. And so Paul and Barnabas are telling everybody about this, and they're getting into this, and they're telling people, and somebody kind of goes rogue and goes astray, and it starts with saying that the Gentiles can't be saved without being circumcised. If you don't know what that word means, you can talk to your parents later. If you're a grown adult, I'm not still willing to help answer that question. Right? Like that's, so they're sitting there and they're saying, if you're not circumcised, then you can't believe in God. You can't be early Christian. You can't be part of this church. And Paul and Barnabas are traveling around sharing all this, and they're here, and they come into Jerusalem, they come into this council, and they're sharing this, and they find, and I love what they do here, because the very first part of 15, they completely throw the person under the bus, and they say, somebody is going rogue, somebody is doing this, somebody is going out and telling people this, right? Like if you think about it, we all have somebody in our head. I have multiple ones in my head that I think of that do the, hey, I'm not saying this is going on, but so-and-so says this is going on, right? Like, and you sit there and you're like, okay, you really believe it, you just don't have the audacity to actually say that you're the one that's saying it, right? Like they confront through that other thing. And I feel like it's the same thing. The council is in the spot where they kind of believe it, but they're not willing to stand up to Paul and Barnabas. So they're saying, people are saying that you can't be saved. And so Paul and Barnabas go through this, and it gets to this line, and I love this line more than anything. And I'm telling the rest of the story, but this line is everything. And so Paul just says, "It's my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for Gentiles who are turning to God." Right there, like Paul's just going, why are we making this so difficult? Because again, he didn't say the Easter sermon, but in my head version of this, he says, last Easter sermon, we talked about this. Jesus came for everybody. Why are we making it so difficult? Why are we making it so hard for the Gentiles? All because, that thing hasn't happened, right? Like, why? This is not fair. And this is the thing about the church. This is where we struggle because it continues on in this entire thing where we knock people. We knock them down for what they believe or they don't believe. We say they're not good enough to be part of this church. One of my first trips to Jamaica, I love the country of Jamaica. I've been there on mission trips. Not the one that you see on the commercials where, you're on the ocean. We're up in the mountains, right? So we're up in the mountains, and I go to this church, and I love it, and I'm watching, and I hear the singing. You can hear it from miles away, like they're just bellowing. And I come into the church, and I'm just like, this is so cool. Until I found out the service was 3.5 hours long. But other than that, it was like this cool moment. I'm sitting there, and so kind of like after the service, or I guess it was about the 17th intermission, they do lots of breaks and then come back around. And I'm talking to the pastor. I'm like, what are all the people outside? Like, why aren't they in here? And he's like, oh, those are the people we don't let in the church. I said, excuse me? Here I am, 22, 23 at the time. I'm like, you don't let them in the church? Yeah, well, they don't have shoes. Those ladies don't have the right hats on. And he starts nitpicking all the reasons why they're not allowed in the building. My heart broke. And if you know me, the rest of the service, I was outside. Sitting with those people. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you kidding me? We're not letting people in the church because they don't have shoes, they don't have hats, they don't have, they're not jumping through the right hoops. This is what Paul and Barnabas are talking to back then. What are we doing? And I love how they fix it, right? They don't just fix it by saying, no, that's stupid, we need to do that. They write a letter. They have the elders get together and they write a letter. And not only do they send the letter to the church, but they send people. They send Paul and Barnabas. And they send other guys to say, we want to make sure it is very well known that this entire thing is not you can believe in God. You can be a Christian. You can be part of this church. And it talks about later in Acts how they were just so happy inside because of the message they got. And how they were just affirmed, right? Everybody likes to hear how well they did. There's no part of on a Sunday as a pastor, I get done, I'm like, I hope somebody tells me I stunk it up. I really hope somebody tells me all the bad things I did. You want to be told the good, right? And this is what's happening here. With Paul and Barnabas, they're being told the good. They're telling them, this is where our church culture has to shift. Because churches, Dave shared this with me about a week and a half ago, and it's really just resonated so much. Churches currently, the problem we have is that they tell people they need to behave so that they can believe, and then they get to belong. We do that as a church. We say, you have to do this to get here. You have to fix yourself to come in this building. One of the guys in our church did that to me. He texted me a couple weeks ago, and I guess it was a week ago. It was right after Dave sent me this. And he said, John, I can't come to church. I said, what's going on? I kind of need you. He was on for one of the volunteer positions, and he said, well, I fell into some habits. I fell into some stuff that I shouldn't be doing. And I said, okay. And he goes, I got to fix those things so I can come back to church. And I went, no. You need to get to church. Because what we're doing at One Church, what you're doing at Thrive, and we're changing that culture. It's no longer, it's now belong, a place to belong. We say that at the end of every Sunday. You have a place to belong. We set up an atmosphere of a place to belong so that if you have a place that you can belong, then you can believe. You can have a faith in God. And because of that, we have the Bible that teaches us how to behave. We have teachings that teach us that. That's the culture we need. So of all the little gimmicky things and all the stupid stuff that I've stolen from Thrive and I've been part of and it's been awesome, that's the part that we wanted. That was the part that is different. We want a part of being a church where you can belong. You can walk in and know that you belong at Thrive. So in the middle of all of this stuff, and I want to tell you a fun little story. Like we as a church, again, just come up with stupid ideas just like you guys do and find ways. And now that Dave made an intro video, I got to like one-up him next time and have a dumber way to embarrass him when he's over there. But we as a church, we were going through this series and we were really struggling. It was born out of my wife and I. We're just kind of going through that time. Maybe you're there right now in your marriage, like where you're just like, we feel like we're coexisting, right? We're just walking in the home together and it's like, yep, check. I'll take this kid to this kid to this practice, and I will hopefully see you at the end of that, and I will say goodnight, and we will start this all over again. And we were just going through this, and I said, there has to be something more. So we did a sermon series on resetting. What is it that is getting in your way? And we took part of Acts, a different part in the book of Acts, where I talk about the things that get in our way from what God has for us. And in there, I gave an entire sermon series and we walked through it, and everybody got every week to write something on a card of, God, this is my prayer. And at the end of it, I said, this one is I want a special one. I want you to write on your card something that is getting in the way of your faith with God. What was stopping you from being the man or woman of God that you can be? And so we sat there and we went through, and it was one of those Sundays as a pastor, you're just like, this is awesome. Like, I'm crying, they're crying, we're loving it. People are like giving of things that are getting in their way, and they write them on this piece of paper, and it's just one of those Sundays where I'm exhausted afterwards, but it's like that good exhausted, and we finish it up, and we put them in this can up front. And I went home and I was fighting a cold, and I took the next day off, and I have a guy that helps me out named Adam, who is what we call him our facility pastor. So he jokes that he like ministers to the toilets, which we needed a couple weeks ago because we had, but anyways, right? Like we had all of this stuff and he goes through this, but he helps me with all these dumb ideas. And I said, hey, it was a couple weeks, I said, what did we do with all those papers? And so he like, and the most sarcastic, if you think Dave's sarcastic, Adam is like 20 times more. And he's like, well, I've been just reading them every day, realizing how messed up we all are. And I'm like, please tell me you're joking. And he's like, yeah, no, I put them in, back in the storage room. And so we took them out, and I said, what do we do with these? Like in Acts, they burned them. And he goes, yeah, that we could do that. I said, okay. And so he's like, give me a couple days. And Saturday morning, I said, I want to show the church what we did. And Saturday morning, he said, hey, I need you to meet me out at our friend Chris's house. I said, okay. So we go out there, and if you can throw the picture up, this is what we did. Adam showed up with a boat because we were doing the Burn the Ship song through that entire thing. And he shredded up all the papers, put them in there, and he made a catapult. Just because he can, right? And he said, well, I want this to burn up. So he put the flaming ball inside the catapult, and luckily he made it in one shot because the catapult then went up in flames after he shot it, right? Landed in and just completely burned up all of this. And it was so beautiful. It was a moment, I sat there again and I watched, I'm sitting there as the video's playing, and I'm getting to watch. We don't have spotlights. So I get to actually see faces of people. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching people crying again because they're seeing their sin. They're seeing their things that got in the way. The parts of their story just literally engulf in flames. And it was just this powerful moment, right? And I'm loving it, and we get all done, and God just worked through it. And I was like, that's what we're talking about. We're a place where people can believe. We're a place where people can grow their faith and all this stuff. And we get done, and I'm showing one of our friends that couldn't make it that Sunday, and I knew how much it meant to them. And she looks at me, she goes, all I got to say is that's the most one church thing we could have ever done. I said, you're right. Just the most Engler thing ever, there's beauty in hearing that, right? When something happens to go, that's the most Thrive thing I've ever heard of. That's a compliment. You guys as a church, the difference you're making, yeah, we say it in jest, we say it in humor, but it's a compliment. what you guys are doing is amazing. What God is doing through you guys is amazing. It's so beautiful to see. That culture, that part of who you are, the DNA, the makeup of Thrive, the makeup of One Church, is changing it. I'm not up here, it's hard because part of me in my spirit just wants to talk about the churches and talk about the hurt. Like I worked in churches. I was part of churches and I saw damage. I spent way too long working in places that I felt like I was changing the culture, but I was just running into a wall. I spent too many years in that hurt because I needed something more. And I'm not knocking churches. Like I tell people all the time, I'm not knocking a church. I'm not I'm just saying, we got to get this better. We got to do this right. We got to be a place that provides healing. We got to be a place that provides where somebody can belong and be part of something. So part of that culture of you guys and us is we want a place that's fun, and I know you guys have fun, we have fun. We joke around, we do a lot of dumb stuff, but in the end, it's a place where people can have a passionate relationship with God. But it's important to have fun. I believe wholly in everything in me that God loves to see us smile and have fun. I got to believe as much as I was up here being surprised by the ridiculous video, that God's up there going, rolling his eyes, going, oh, you guys again. I love it because I made you. I created you, right? The beauty in that. We want a place that you belong. We want a place that you can be in a church. One of the parts I took from that meeting with Dave and Matt, and I've held tight to it, and it's been difficult as a year and a half into a church plant, is I don't care where you go, I want you in a church that believes in God. And that's been the hardest thing. People have come in, and I'm like, oh, this is a good family. I hope they stay. And then they're like, oh, this really isn't hitting it for us. Okay, that's okay. Let me help you find a place you can belong. And I give them a list of other churches to try. And then there's the people that you hope never come back again, and they stay. No, I'm just kidding. Right? But it's beautiful. It's wonderful to see. We want you in a place. We see people and we go, hey, where can you be fed? I say this with the greatest heart in the world. I love my mom, but my mom doesn't love our church. She loves what's going on, and she supports it, and she's kind of like that. Yep, that's great, and she really does. She loves it because she loves me. She loves the church, but I laugh because she goes to her church because it has hymns and she doesn't have to look on a screen. And then she sneaks in the back so she can hear her little son talk. That's fine, Mom. I love it. I want you in a place where you're being fed. That's okay that you don't land and want to be at One Church. That's okay, Mom. One of my close friends, Chris, when I went to plant the church, it was this awkward conversation where he's like, hey, I just want to let you know that we really like our church. And I said, I know you love your church. It's awesome. And he's like, so I just want to let you know, we really like, I said, I know you love your church. You've been going there, and I think that's awesome. And it finally got to the point where he's just like, we're just not going to be able to go to start the church plant with you. I'm like, that's great. You're in a church where you're being spiritually fed. I don't care. Churches fall into that entire trap. I laugh so much. I'm sure Mount Pleasant has something. Midland has the Ask Midland group, and it's so funny because literally once a month, you see somebody that says, I'm new to town. What's a good church? And I just read them to laugh, right? I scroll through. I'm like, oh, yeah. And they're like, we're looking for a family-friendly church. And I'm looking at it and oh, try out this church. What church is it? I Hate Little Kids Church. Yeah, that's a good one. You just sit there and you're just like, you just laugh. And I tell my church, I'm like, you know what the best thing I want to see is? I want to see somebody from One Church on there, and they give a list of other churches to go to. Because that's such a generic way. We invite people to come to One Church that we love and be there. But you know what? If my best friend doesn't want to come, that's okay. I want to help you find a different church to belong in. That's what a healthy culture, that's what a church looks like. So we have a church that's fun. We have a church that wants you in a church. And the last point I want to make is, I'll be honest, is probably one of the ones that I can say to you guys because this is safe, but I couldn't say to my own church because it's difficult. I try to show them, I try to teach them, We have a church culture. We have something here that is so beautiful at Thrive and at One Church. But I need to tell you, please, Thrive Church, don't change your culture. You can change the way you do stuff. You can do other stupid stuff, but don't change your culture. You guys came to this church. Everybody here came to Thrive for a reason. And you landed here and you get spiritually fed here and you've grown your faith. And something happens in churches. You guys are coming up on 10 years, and I've seen it time and time again. The people of the church start trying to change the church. They start trying to go, well, that's what I needed 5 years ago, 7 years ago. But now I need something different. So church, change for me. And I can list off thousands of churches that have fallen into that trap. I can list off churches that continue to go into that and they say, oh, we're doing this, and then they forget about it. My facilities pastor, Adam, he's always, when I come up with a dumb idea, he's like, whoa. You know how we get people? We do more rummage sales and bake sales because that gets everybody in the doors. No, it doesn't, right? Relationships get people in the doors. Relationships, your relationships with friends and your relationship with God get people in the door. So please, I beg of you, as you guys continue to celebrate 10 years, be aware. The devil's working to try to change his culture because he doesn't like what's happening within this building. And as we continue to grow as a church, as One Church, so many cool things are happening, and we continue that, and it's so cool to see what God has for us. We as a church are celebrating. You guys are getting insider information. We as a church have outgrown the building that we're in. And God is doing so many cool things. And next week, as long as everything's signed, we get to announce the new location that we're going to move to. That's going to give us just a bigger place. And it was so cool because we're going from like one pole barn that was for lumber to another pole barn that's for lumber, but bigger. Like, and as I was meeting with the guy, it was just, sorry, random side note. It was so funny because he sat there and he's like, well, John, I get what you're doing. I think it's awesome. And like, the world doesn't understand the culture of One Church and Thrive, right? Like, and he's sitting there and he goes, do you really think you can pull off making a church out of a warehouse? I'm like, yeah, I've seen a few. Right? Like it's so beautiful when God just works in that. And we celebrate that. So celebrate the culture, celebrate what you guys are doing, and spur each other on to greatness, but don't lose that culture that built who you guys are. So when you ask the question, why do we do church differently? We do it to have fun. We do it so people have a church. We do it so that people can belong. And we hold tight to that culture. We don't let people fight. We don't let people dismiss that culture because that is so vitally important to you guys growing the kingdom and radically just showing people the love of God. Will you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for a chance just to come and share and just the laughter and the joking. And God, just thank you. Thank you for being a God that loves, that cares for us. We ask just a blessing. Right now, I ask a blessing over Thrive Church as they continue to grow and celebrate and all the exciting stuff that Matt talked about in that prayer. Like that's amazing, God, the stuff you're doing. And to be able to sit there and to witness that. And to be so close and to see, God, what you have, and what you're doing here, and what you continue to do. God, I ask that you help protect the culture of this church and of One Church as we're trying to just buck the system on what church looks like for people. There's so many people that are damaged, so many people that are been hurt. But together we want to celebrate you bringing people back to you, God, to you, to a relationship with you, and the power that can change a community, that can change eventually the world to turn their eyes back to you, God. We thank you and we love you for all that you're saying, all that you do, and all that you teach us to continue to do church differently so more people will see you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.